We should be live on YouTube. Let me just make sure. Look on the other feed. Yeah, we are. All right, yep, the chat room's up. All right, welcome everybody. We are here live on YouTube. We got an awesome guest today. Longtime friend of the show and guest. He's been a guest on my old radio show as well. Actually, both of my radio shows, going back to I think 2016 or 17. The one and only Glenn Kreisberg. Everybody, he is an author and really amazing information we got to bring to you guys on the megalithic sites. And if you guys haven't picked up Spirits in Stone yet, I highly recommend you guys pick up this book. I've recommended almost everybody I know that's into ancient stonework, megalithic sites, and especially in the Northeast and of America and all around the United States. Glenn is one of the go-to guys for at least not only the Northeast, but some of the megalithic sites all over the world. And you could find Spirits in Stone wherever you find books, from Amazon to Simon and Schuster to all the different websites out there. So everybody pick that up. Highly recommended. Welcome everybody joining in the chat room as well. So we're going to bring Glenn on. Welcome, Glenn. Glad to have you here. It's a pleasure to finally have you on my YouTube and see your face. We had you on my radio a few times, but it's a pleasure to bring you here. So I'm really looking forward into some of the things we're going to talk about today.
Well, thanks for having me, Ra, and welcome to your listeners and guests. And it's nice to be here. We always have a wide-ranging discussion and go in a lot of different directions. So I'm looking forward to doing that.
Yeah, I'm really excited, man. I definitely was excited when I first found your book and I saw that you talked about the North Salem, New York balanced rock, something that's been very special to me my whole life. So since the 80s, almost since the early 80s when I first saw it. So we'll get into that later in the show. First, let's get you introduced to the audience here, and I'm interested in first, how did you first get into megalithic research and stonework in general? Are you a stonemason by trade? Do
No, no, not at all. I'm actually a radio frequency engineer. I help design the network that we all use to share and store our information.
Oh, that's right.
Uh,
That was
my,
right. It was the other guy that was the stonemason. That's right.
well, he's got something on me, but I have moved stones around, and I'm interested, in how people moved giant stones, the way a stonemason would be interested in, how they built it, and that's a big question.
I
I
was
got my
confusing with Jim Vieira, I think, at first.
Yep, Jim's a friend, and
Yeah.
from Nira, at least a decade ago, and he's done a lot of really wild research on giants and you know alternative ancient history. Jim's a
Wow.
good
So
guy.
you being interested, you being a frequency all into that, is that how you got into the sound
The
energy?
archaeoacoustic, yeah, the archaeoacoustics. My path into
Wow.
that was through radio frequency and being able to model environments for their radio propagation properties and kind of understand how waves, unseen waves and energy interact with architecture and sacred sites like Stonehenge and sites on Malta. So, and sound is a big part of it. Frequency is a big part of sound,
So
obviously.
was there like a certain time in your life where you were already into like being a frequency engineer or into those like sound and frequency, and then you stumbled upon some of these sites possibly being linked to that as well?
Uh, no, I don't think it quite happened that way. I
Like
actually
what was the transition until you all of a sudden finding out like being linked to like these ancient sites having some of these properties about them?
sound properties. Yeah, and I had always heard that many ancient sites had properties associated with sound and energy associated at different frequencies. Subsonic, ultrasonic, and also audible to the human ear. And I just always had a bent towards science and trying to understand how those things would affect us psychologically, physiologically. Altered states of consciousness play a big part of it. So, yeah, there's a lot of dots to connect. I started early on in my life, I was as a young person growing up in Woodstock, New York. I was lucky enough to work in a bookstore called Three Geese in Flight, which you can still find online. It's a bit rare, out of print antiquarian bookstore
Wow.
run by a good friend named Sam Wenger. Sam, collected books on Arthurian legend and Celtic folklore and mythologies from around the world.
That's my area right there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I was just a kid, and I was in the work for him in his bookstore, and I would just read these books, Saga Americana and Barry Fell's America BC, and those types of alternative narratives, and it really sparked my interest early on. And then, as an older, as an adult, as I started working as a radio frequency engineer, I saw there was a lot of crossover, and then later on, actually working on a siting committee for a cell tower is how I got involved with the stone mounds in the woods and
Wow.
what they call the Manitou Hasanel or Manitou Hasanesh in Algonquin dialect, which means spirit stones.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's if people know, especially in New York, people have heard of the Manitou, this area. That's really amazing. So do you think that a lot of these ancient stone sites could be actually connected to maybe a pre-flood or maybe end of the ice age type ancient Vedic worldwide civilization that was sort of chanting mantras and hymns to the sun at these sites to sort of anchor in that energy with the Sanskrit chanting and all of that. Do you think it's possible that they're that old and they're connected to a worldwide culture?
Well, I think there's a few things to unpack there. Yes, I think they could be very ancient. Whether they're older than the last ice age, that's problematic because, of course, the last ice age would have scoured the landscape and
Well, I
anything
mean,
that
like the end of the last ice age, sort of
yeah, no,
coming.
I think they may be some of them indicative of marking that new era after the ice age when the younger Dryas and severe climate change happened, and we went from being you know dry and cold to very warm very quick, and sea levels rose and things were submerged that probably were around before that event happened. I think there may be evidence off the coast on the continental shelf of older cultures that may have been preserved because they were submerged and not necessarily subjected to environmental things that have happened on the surface,
Yeah.
exposed. And there's been a lot that's happened. Um, we could get into disaster cycles and sunspot and solar energy and how it affects the earth and our magnetic field and all of that.
Yeah. Let's get into that.
It's a deep dive. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I truly feel that most of these sites are connected to the sun. I mean, it's 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 the judge, the ultimate judge and God of the solar system. It's how we get information to the planet. It's how we have life and it brings frequencies to the planet that makes plants grow and all of this going on. So I found it very interesting that I'm interested in your work because you're into the sound even more, because you were like with the sound temples and I totally slipped my mind that you were a sound engineer, a frequency engineer as well at first. So that's even more incredible because you're familiar with Callanish, right?
With what?
Callanish, the stone circle in Scotland.
Oh, yes. Kalanish. Yes. Yep.
I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. Yeah, Callanish. Is it
It
Callanish?
might be Kalanish. But
I
I'm
don't
very
know how
familiar.
I don't know how to pronounce it either. But
I
anyway,
think
this stone site is incredible because I'm looking to go there next year with Maria Wheatley's going. My friend Maria Wheatley's been there several times, but this site I honestly feel is connected to the information that's coming from the sun, in particular when it comes through the magnetosphere and it makes a certain sound frequency. I mean, a lot of these sites, Glenn, I mean, it can't be a coincidence. So when our sun, for people that don't know out there, I probably have like a senior undergraduate level in plasma physics. I've been doing it for about 5 or 6 years. And what got me into it is some of my experiences at the site. So when the sun sends these loops of coronal mass ejections. They're electrons in spiraling magnetic loops. And these loops, they look like ankhs, right? Like Egyptian ankh. And these loops, they come from the sun. And when some of the electrons get caught in our magnetic field around the planet, they make these chirping sounds, just like the cuckoo bird, just like the hoopoe bird, just like the woodpecker bird. And these birds are talked about in ancient mythology, associated with stone circles. Now, Kalanish is a spot where auroras come in. There's a spot where there's opening in the magnetic shield right there. I could pull up spots where you see a beautiful auroras over the stone circles. And one of the main myths about Kalanish is on midsummer night, special time of the year with the sun, that the Shining One appears, walking up the avenue of stones, heralded by the cuckoo's call. Now, come on, the Shining One is the sun, walking up the avenue of stones, heralded by the sound the electrons make in the magnetosphere as the information is coming in through the planet, right? And those sounds that the hoopoe bird and the cuckoo bird and all those birds make, it's a certain frequency that birds mimic these sounds right before dawn, and it helps the plant cells stomata open up, which make things flourish and be abundant. So it's like it's the music that's coming from the sun, and the birds are mimicking this an hour before dawn.
I love that because it brings back such a memory from my childhood where I laid in bed and listened to that symphony of bird calls outside my window growing up for years in this spring and the summer, and it was so loud, and I don't hear it anymore now. And I still live in the woods, but I got 5 cats, so that's probably part of the reason why I don't hear it. But
Yeah.
I've also been told it's not as loud and it's not that symphony that there's a term actually, anthrophony, which is like the sound of life. It's like symphony and anthropology put together. um and just so I can relate totally to the power of that. That and to connect it to the cycle of the day and to nature and to the awakening of the plants, because they all are connected. They talk to each other through their roots, connected to the earth, and it's like a communication network, like I've been working on for the last 25 years. They're sharing information,
This is the book I'm
vital
writing
for.
on right now. It has to do with this very information that I'm discussing because I found it in all mythologies as well, like all cultures, with the woodpecker from Zeus and Hera, with the woodpecker and the cuckoo. There, I mean, it's all over.
Yeah, yeah, no, and it's all it's expressed metaphorically, symbolically. It's not expressed scientifically or technically, but it is scientific and technical. There's an
Yeah,
aspect of that to it, um, for us to understand it, at least in this day and age where we're kind of very material and tactile, and we
yeah.
gotta, you know,
You know what it is, Glenn? I think in the past, and I've talked about this before on my channel, in the past, when you science and spirituality were fused together, now we keep them completely separate. So, like in the past, with a lot of these ancient writings and ancient sites were connected to were spiritual initiates and adepts. And spiritual initiates and adepts, they were scientists, they were shaman, they were astronomers, they were astrologers, they were warriors. They were all this all in one. And nowadays we have all these things kept way separate and completely. And now, and in the past, it seemed like we were harnessing solar and stellar and cosmic energies using stone sites and natural elements. And now we build artificial materials to replicate those energies and work with those energies instead of our own bodies and stone sites. So it's like we're using technology in the place of what we should be doing.
we see there. It's been suggested that the stones at Karnak were set up in such a way that all their magnetic polarities, their north and south polarities, are aligned. And that, of course, is what you're talking about when you're talking about a particle accelerator, like the Large Hadron uh, Collider in CERN, Switzerland, where they're trying to discover the God particle.
Yeah, so
Well,
when you have that, you have them smashing together, right? In the
you have a flow, right? A flow of energy, of electrons, of particles along the north and south, um, polarized. The stones, every stone has a magnetic polarity, north and the south.
Yep.
And those large giant stones that are set up all in a row happen to have, and this was oh God, I don't want to forget his name. He's such a wonderful John Burke. He's no longer with us, but Seed of Stone, Stone of Knowledge. Um,
Great
uh,
book.
he was the one who documented how all the stones at Karnak had their magnetic polarities aligned, and it matched. The only thing you could match it to was a particle accelerator, and they're designed that way to have all of their magnets all in a row, north to north, south to south. So what were the ancients up to? They were you know, divining and working with earth energy, telluric energy, the natural energies that flow through the earth that connect the ley lines and the meridians of power, and have been mapped by the ancients for many, many years. And if you think about it, go back to your dolmen for a minute, in North Salem, and all dolmens, how they're raised up above the ground, isolated, like a string on a guitar's neck is lifted with the fret so it can resonate. Otherwise, it won't. You just have a string, right? So it allows the energy that's right along the surface of the earth to resonate at a specific frequency, um, and it exists in a zone. If you think about our atmosphere, it's positively charged, right? Because of electrical storms at any given moment on the Earth's atmosphere, there's tens of thousands of electrical storms, thunderstorms. So we've got a positively charged atmosphere, and we've got a negatively ground Earth. The Earth is grounded, and where you have a negative charged field and a positively charged field coming in contact, which is the Earth's surface, you have resistance, and that resistance is where and why how they manage the energy that comes from the underworld. Now I'm kind of switching gears here, but traditional cultures and shamanic cultures who have this three-dimensional worldview of the sky world and the ground world and the underworld, they're tapping into, they're managing, they're controlling, they're manipulating, exploiting that energy in a way that we really don't get right now because we're at the wrong place in the cycle. Um, uh, but we there are clues, and by meditating and by chanting and creating certain sound frequencies, we can get as close as possible in this age, this you know for lack of a better, materialistic, militaristic, immature age that humanity is stuck in. Just look around, right? You can. That's a pretty good description of what we see in our kind of sad state of
Yeah.
affairs. Not to bum everybody out, but what I'm saying.
True.
Um,
Yeah, it's true. I mean, they say the Sanskrit language as well is developed off the very sounds of Shiva's cosmic drum. Like how it's made from the sounds of the universe, the sounds the sun is making, and the plasma, and all the different solar wind, and all of those sounds. It said it's supposed to anchor our our individual life here to the cosmic consciousness of the sounds of the universe to the sounds of Earth. So maybe by chanting specific mantras to the sun, that's what they were anchoring. They were anchoring that solar cosmic energy to the energy here.
well, I mean, the sun is probably the oldest worship deity on earth. So if you think about the earliest religions, the earliest things that humans venerated and made worthy of their worship, it was the sun, and it was
Yeah.
women. It was the goddess and the sacred feminine and the giver of life. So to me, the most ancient people, the first people who came to our region in the Northeast and maybe started building with stone after the end of the last ice age, were probably people who um, you know, um, worship the sun, worship the sacred feminine, and set up altars to the suns and to the sun and stars and Venus, and they associated different deities with different objects in the sky, and gave them life. So it's not surprising that we see these types of altars on our landscape, going back to when the first people arrived. And I think that's part of what I've been able to help document in the Northeast. Um, yeah, so
Yeah, let's get into some of these sites in the Northeast that you've been getting into, because I'm also interested in what you talked about, and I'd like to get into it even further. So you could describe it in a if people want to pick up Glenn's book. Once again, it's Spirits in Stone, and on page 25 in Spirits in Stone, he talks about the certain stones like blue stone with the water running over the surface, and it's stripping, the hydrogen molecules and everything with the and it really when it's at the top of the landscape and goes to the top of the landscape. You talk about that releasing the negative ions and all of that.
Ionization, yes,
Yeah,
ionization. This is a naturally occurring process that happens in places where water runs over rock, like waterfalls.
yeah,
And if you built a stone structure, as the water from rain ran over it, cascaded, you'd have the release of negative ions,
yeah.
and negative the release of negative ions into the atmosphere. uh, when we're in proximity of that, we feel good. That's like making us groove and feel, right on many levels. And it is probably on a very cellular level that we get, like our atoms realign and kind of
So
get back and
incredible. It's so
back.
simple but so incredible.
Yeah, yeah. And it can be accomplished many different ways. Um, maybe you want me to share my screen, and we can
Yeah, please do.
we
Please
can
do.
we can look at a few of these things that we were
Yeah, it's
talking
the
about.
living waters. Like it's connecting the cosmic solar waters to our waters on the planet, like these stone sites. It's really incredible. Yeah, we're seeing it.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. So, you can't mention my book without mentioning this one, uh, Manitou, the sacred landscape of New England's native civilization. James Mavor, Byron Dix, they're like a couple of my heroes. And they were pretty serious researchers, um, NERA members for many years. Um, there's James Mavor on the left, Byron Dix, and they really made the case in Manitou that Native Americans, that there was an ancient civilization here. First of all, a lot of academics and historians didn't really give credit to there being a civilization, but they proved there was, and that they built in stone, which is another thing that was not generally accepted, and also that in many cases they aligned their constructions to events on the horizon, archaeoastronomy or observational astronomy. And Dix actually worked. Byron Dix on the right, he actually worked as an optics engineer for NASA, and Mavor was an architect, a naval architect at Woods Hole. And I love these clippings. I bought a book, the book Atlantis, the Antediluvian Civilization by Ignatius Donnelly. Kind of like the Bible on Atlantis from
Yeah,
the
I know it. Yep.
late 1800s. So I bought a used copy of that, like way back, who knows, 25 years ago. And I opened it up, and inside were clippings, newspaper clippings from the New York Times. It was like finding gold.
Isn't it awesome when you get gems like that?
Yeah, it
I've
was.
bought and used books from library like that. You go out and it was like a library book that they took off the shelf, and then I bought it used, and then I've gotten like people's collections of clippings before in there as well. It's crazy.
It is. It's tremendous. So what do you think? I freaked out when I saw this
It is like
article
finding a
on,
treasure of gold. You're so
on
right.
Atlantis. But look, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but that's James Mavor right there from Manitou, down with the hat on in the
Wow.
hole at Santorini in the
That's a
Mediterranean.
spiritual gift from you. That's not just luck. That's like
Well,
a
I guess
spiritual
I
gift.
I believe in higher powers, and
Yeah.
maybe these came to me through higher powers. But
Oh, that
what's
was
really
guided. You were guided to that, Come
what's
on.
what's so interesting is that here it is in the New York Times. Here's the Sunday Science edition of the New York Times talking about Atlantis and talking about technology and excavations. This is 1967. These clippings are from. So I don't know if we've come a long way or not, because now for science to talk about Atlantis, people get attacked, like Graham Hancock with his series on ancient apocalypse that came out late last year or the year before. It took a lot of heat. The archaeologist jumped down his throat for suggesting that there may have been something like Atlantis. Yet,
And then people get on Graham's case for cherry pick, telling I've heard people like criticize him for cherry picking what he what he puts his name behind, but he's such a big name that he gets attacked when he does put his name behind certain things.
He's not an archaeologist. He never says he is. And what he
Yeah,
does is he puts the best case forward. He's like an attorney making the case for this. And he's yes, there may be counter arguments that are strong, but he's there to make the case for this argument, that there was an ancient civilization that disappeared, and there's scant evidence of it, and we have to look hard to document it, but it's worth looking. And that's what these articles speak to, in the New York Times back then in 1967. Um,
so
so
cool.
yeah, archaeoastronomy, landscape archaeology,
Thank
all
you for
around the
sharing
world.
that with us.
Oh, my pleasure. All around the world, you've got examples of these types of constructions that align the earth with the sky. And we have examples here, of course, Stonehenge in the upper left, Mandajar on Malta, which is the oldest still functioning solar calendar on Earth. And then Coachella on the bottom left is that famous calendar site in Peru with the mounds that represent the different months of the year, and the observatory where you can spot, on the horizon where those alignments are. And then the bottom right is our region, right? That's the chambers in Putnam County, all many which are aligned to the winter and equinox solstice sunrises. Um, so it's a worldwide phenomenon that is not generally accepted in the U.S. Northeast, for a variety of reasons, some of which are very political and dogmatic, that we could certainly discuss. Uh, are you familiar with Gary David's work, the Orion Zone? He really showed. You're muted.
He was the one who talked about the Hopi a lot as well, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and documented how they moved their encampments over thousands of years. These were the ancestral Anastasi, um, along solstice paths, along the lines of the winter solstice and summer solstice, sunrise and sunset. Those are all archaeological sites you see there, um, ruins and pueblos that were.
Oh, so this is pre-Hopi right here.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And then we could talk about how Washington was laid out originally, the plan of Washington D.C. And this will make us take a real left turn into Masonic and Templar traditions, which of course are connected to the Egyptian mystery school tradition. And DC, of course, was laid out very much in a Masonic plan, where you had avenues and streets that aligned with the solstices and with moon rises and sunrises at certain times of year, because the founding fathers and the engineers, they were all Masons, Freemasons,
Were they
and
using granite in their structures, Glenn?
some of them absolutely
Yeah.
granite and marble, the highest quality stones. They were creating monuments, for the gods, really. And I don't know if you follow any of the work of Scott Walther or know any of the particulars of the Kensington Runestone and the Templars' early voyages to America.
Oh yeah, I
But
know about the Kensington Runestone. Yeah. You remember
yeah, so
do you remember this book from back in the day?
I can't quite make it out.
Oh wait, let me see if I can't see if my let me pull up my um can you see it here?
Ancient Mysteries.
Yeah, from New England. This was the first book I actually saw North Salem in by Robert Cahill.
Yes, I have seen copies of that. It's
Yeah.
not in my library, so I'm jealous. That's a good one.
Yeah, I had gotten this in a bookstore in New England years ago. Years ago. And in Salem. Because
Yeah.
Lori Bruno is like a close family member of mine, and she's like a
Right.
world-renowned psychic in her 80s now. She has a store in Salem, Massachusetts, and right next to it was an old bookstore where I got, yeah, there it is. See?
Now I can see it. Yeah,
Yeah,
everybody can see it. Nice. Yes.
yeah.
Now that's where is the location on the cover? Does it say where the cover shot is?
Cover photo is the monolith at summer solstice sunset Mystery Hill,
Oh, okay. Yep.
North Salem, New Hampshire.
Yeah, very cool site. I talk about that in my book and how the summer solstice sunset alignment from those stones actually runs right through Putnam County and some of the double chambers there that also have similar solstice alignments. So it's a long distance thing, like the Hammonasset line
I'm
going
a
from
huge
long.
book collector, by the way, as well. Huge book
Well,
collector.
that's to your credit because it's getting to be a lost art.
Yeah. Yeah. I've paid, I paid a lot of money just for this book not too long ago. Let me show you. The Oracle of Baalbek. The
Nice.
Yeah, yeah. Oh
Let's
my
see.
God.
What do I have in close proximity I can flash up there for people? This is the good one. The Deep Mysteries,
Oh, I want that. Yes. That's
the answer.
great.
Yeah, that's a good one. And then is a good friend Mark Carlotto, um, Beyond Atlantis. Of course, these
Oh,
aren't
that's
these,
cool.
these are not. He's got a great website. Um, it might be Beyond Atlantis. It might be Before Atlantis, something like that. Uh, so yeah, books are good. Books are
We
good
got the
things.
show and tell today. I love it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Good stuff. Um, Something a little more from the old school. A little Tompkins, Peter Tompkins. Yeah,
Oh, that's a great one right there.
yeah. Secrets of the Great Pyramid. Yeah, there's a whole set of books. So can't have enough books.
You know who was a good research on mythologies? I have a series, a lot of his series of books. He was in the early 1900s, Arthur Bernard Cook.
That
And
name rings a bell.
he did these volumes on Zeus,
Hmm.
big, huge, thick volumes. I have a few of them on Zeus, and he
Wow.
all the mythologies on the
So
solar religions of Zeus,
so
and you find
what
so many connections.
what's your who was Zeus? I mean, was he a visitor, off planet visitor who was, pulling the strings back then?
Well, I think that they're putting like human names on things, but like earthly names to things and giving them earthly characteristics. But I think a lot of what they're talking about is cosmic and solar phenomenon, and then the beings on Earth who were harnessing and communicating with it. You know what I mean? And so like a lot of people they tend to even put like Enki as some sort of human figure or Zeus as a human figure when I really don't think it has to do with that at all. I think it has to do with a sentient solar intelligence that's sending information to Earth. And
Hmm.
then the people that are receiving it and harnessing are the other people that are taking these names on and their characteristics and things like that. Because like when you even like Enki, he's the king of the watery abyss, and it's not the watery abyss on Earth. This is the cosmic solar watery abyss, and that's when you break it down to science, that's plasma. I mean, 99.99% of the mass of the universe is plasma. It's interconnecting everything. The sun is literally a plasma sphere, not a hydrogen gas sphere. It's archaic the way we were taught because it's so hot, it's plasma. So every sun and star is like a river of plasma making a confluence of one big celestial ocean. And Glenn, we see that in every mythology. Every mythology. It's all about
No, we do.
celestial waters.
It's very consistent, and it speaks to the connectivity of all things and this universal field that is a medium that thoughts travel through and energy travels through and can be tapped into, and I don't doubt it, and it's much more profound than that because it affects the whole planet on a planetary scale, on an evolutionary scale. It's like, you have what's known as the global electric circuit, which, because there's plasma in the center of the earth too, right? It makes its way up through the vents in the volcanoes. That's
Yeah.
plasma on earth. And we create plasma fields and things like that, but it is an elemental force, and it may be, like you say, the elemental force because there's enough of it and it's so massive, and the energy that it puts out permeates everything.
It's
Even the
it's it's what creates
darkest,
things.
deepest
Yeah.
vacuums of space are not actually vacuums at all.
It's not empty. Yeah. It's
Right.
not actually empty space out there. It's actually, yeah, plasma is interconnecting nebulas and galaxies and everything. It's the lifeblood of the universe. It's sentient.
It's what allows for entangled particles in quantum physics, and that break all the rules, and
Yeah.
travel
I think this
trap.
is what Edgar Casey was calling the Akashic field. You
Hmm.
know, it's a
Could
sentient
be.
particles of creation, destruction, evolution,
Well,
sustenance, everything.
recently there's been a theory, and you can Google this, and actually, America's astronomer Bob Berman talks about this, that consciousness may end up being a fundamental force of the universe, like the strong force, the weak force, the nuclear force, the electromagnetic force. The force of consciousness may end up, I mean, there's not a lot of science, or I don't know if there's any science, but
Yeah.
it's been postulated that maybe that, because it is such a powerful force, and what we were just talking about, the interconnectedness, and on a particle level, and on a subatomic and quantum level, it connects everything, and that's really what that we're talking about here.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, while I was at that red granite site in North Salem, because I've been working at that site on solstices for years, bringing my crystal skulls there, my copper devices that I make, all these copper devices that I make, and I meditate with the copper and the crystal skulls. And I was starting to get symbols, telepathic symbols working at that site. And one thing I was shown was the ancient symbol of the Vedic and the ancient Egyptian and all cultures when they show the loop, the Ankh loop, and how it's a solar symbol, and it literally is a coronal mass ejection loop. I mean, I literally think that was the origins of, I mean, the Hindu Pasha. When
Well,
look at real quick if I can
well, these cycles of time that we were discussing earlier, which have to do with, you know, um, they're tied into the Vedic cycles of the yugas, and of the destruction and birth and resurrection, destruction can't have resurrection without destruction.
yeah.
So these cycles, these cataclysmic cycles, and if you look at Robert Schoch's work on corona mass ejections, and kind of look at the not if but when potential for one of these things coming and taking us out, or at least taking the grid down, and setting us back. um, it's quite likely, and it would be the biggest warning. And a super flare, one of these looping flares that releases a CME, when all to use a metaphor, when all the stars align, when it's pointed right at Earth, it is
Yeah.
going to, our and there are times when the human race is more vulnerable, and right now is one of the times, because our magnetic field is very weak, one of the weakest periods in the history, and it goes back a long time that they can record the history of the magnetic field on Earth, because they do they do ice core, and they do tree rings, and they do a lot of things to understand that this has happened in the past, and it is going to happen again, where our magnetic field weakens to the point where it reverses. We have a reversal in the electromagnetic field. Um, and, it can't be good for a technological society that relies so much on electricity, and has a grid that has, infrastructure that's exposed to the atmosphere, that's going to cook, when and if it does. And it is a question of when, not if. So, it's important to be aware of these things, not to be frightened of them. But there's an interesting podcast online called The Suspicious Observer, Space News. I think his name is Ben Davison. I may be getting my Bens mixed up, but anyhow, he does like a 2 to 5 minute daily podcast where he looks at the space weather, looks at the sun. They start by talking about sunspot cycle and sunspot activity on the face of the sun facing us. They look at a few different NASA and government tools to rate. Um, oh yeah, nice. There we go.
Yeah, I was
Yeah,
gonna show. Yeah, I'm listening to you. I'm sorry, I didn't mean
yeah.
for you to
No,
stop.
to rate the severity of the events.
Yeah.
X class, M class, different types of class flares, like what you're showing here.
Yeah.
And Now that that might be very typical. That may not be something that's going to put out a CME that's going to throw enough plasma at our magnetic field that's going to cook it or cook us. But in the news, was it last week when they had all of the cell phone outages? You know, T-Mobile and
Yeah, yeah,
and it wasn't just the cell phone networks. It was the internet networks and a lot of the it was enough widespread outages that they said it can't be a hack, right? Can't, this they said definitely not any kind of cyber attack or hacking because it's too random and widespread. But
we
you
have
know what it
everything
ended up
relying on it
being?
too.
They basically nobody just didn't make a news story, but it was solar activity that caused that. 90%. That was an event that affected our telecommunications and circuitry and brought things down. And it coincided with major flares, three in a row, that hit
Yeah,
the sun. And this
yeah,
guy on the Suspicious Observer podcast, he was covering it. So it's like, um, tune in for the next wave of destruction.
for sure. I mean, I think they're talking about it in some of the ancient writings when they have like in ancient Egypt when they talk about one of the ancient writings is called the destruction of humanity. Literally when the people on earth are being negative towards the sun god Ra, so he brings the eye of Ra, which is Sekhmet or Hathor, as a destruction to destroy humanity. And she's annihilating all of humanity, and they have to let her sleep, which is like on the night side when the sun goes down, you know?
Right.
It's really incredible. And then they talk about like they have to make her drunk with these cosmic waters and stuff. So
There's some really strong metaphoric clues there and symbolic clues, that have to be interpreted because,
yeah.
right, they're a
Because
warning and
they were never meant for scholars and academics. They were meant for adepts and it's spiritual initiates, you know?
right, and they were done in a time. You got to people remember until Greek language came along, which isn't that long ago. I mean, humans were around observing and looking and figuring stuff out for tens of thousands of years before the Greeks. But it wasn't
Yeah.
until the Greeks that we had any kind of scientific or technical terminology. You know,
Yeah.
hydrology. It was this. It was the water goddess who provided sustenance, and that was hydrology because that's how it. And it's a shame because our language today distills all these really complex conceptual ideas and abstract ideas into very simple terms and phrases. Native Americans, when they talk about history, it's nothing they can describe in a sentence or a paragraph or a book. It's something they could talk about for a week, and
Yeah.
that's the concept of history.
So
And
before we let you share screen again, I
yeah,
just before I drop it here. So here's a regular solar flare, it's coronal mass ejection from NASA Goddard, and then here you have this is now Varuna from the Vedic, and Varuna is the god of the solar ocean, Glenn, the solar ocean,
right.
and he's riding on the crocodile, and he's carrying each one of those arms, in my opinion, are the vortex of the sun. The swirling vortex of the sun. He's a solar deity, and each one of his arms is holding another attribute of the sun. And one of them just happens to be what they call the Varuna Pasha, the loop. Now, the way they describe this loop is they describe it as a golden noose that comes from the sun and lassos souls and pulls them into the celestial waters.
Hmm.
It also removes the evil. Ganesha uses it to sweep the evil off of Earth. I mean,
Ganesha
that's
the
yeah,
elephant.
Ganesha the elephant. You could see Ganesha here. He's holding the golden noose. He's a solar deity.
Yeah, he's not the color of an elephant, that's for sure.
Yeah, he's a sun. He's a solar deity. And they're doing all the Ganesha mantras are mantras to the sun. I mean,
And
they're
look at
solar.
the guy's holding the umbrella to make sure he doesn't get too much sun.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. And look at this. I mean, this is exactly. I mean, how better can you show it?
Interesting, interesting. Good observation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Glenn, let
And
me
you
step
showed
out
it
of my
elsewhere.
screen
You
for a
showed it.
second. Before I give it back to you, let me just show this too as well. See, I was shown this at the North Salem site. I was given a telepath. So you got Akhenaten, right?
Yeah.
So, um, let me show you real quick. Uh, this is a better. Wait, hold on. Let me go over here. Let me. This is a better one of so I could show you a close up of what I'm just showing you here. I have it here somewhere. Here it is. So that's a better view so you guys can see. I mean, this is now, these deities are solar kings. They're solar dynasty gods or pharaohs. They're all, okay, so we're talking about solar kings, solar dynasty. So they're harnessing information from the sun. You literally have the Aten, the solar disk, handing down a coronal loop to its deity. Look at a coronal mass ejection loop right there from the arm of the sun. And you literally have the snake over the disk, and that's how the electricity travels through the plasma waves, like Naga snakes. And that's how the information comes. I mean, they're showing you plasma physics here. I mean, in a very spiritual way.
Interesting. Yeah, and I like the concept of the ray or the wave um, trans transporting it
Yeah, the solar,
because
it's
that
even called the solar asp or basilic in Greek, the snake. Yeah, it's the way the information travels through the plasma is like snakes, and it's no doubt, man. And I started getting these symbols while I was working at red granite sites. And I love in your book how you describe even like Moreau, the guy who in France did all those experiments, how yeah, electricity and magnetism at the very same time. It's
oh
incredible.
yeah. He made the seismographs, and again, this was in Carnac in France. He showed that they were giant seismographs, and it really got me thinking that most of these places, most of these centers, like Stonehenge, like Giza, like Karnak, like the Northeast, which is a megalithic complex. This is just a grid of complex all over the Northeast. It's solar alignments, um, but these were like earth science centers. They were places where people went to study astronomy and hydrology and seismology and all the different elements. I mean, again, I'm attaching all of the Greek, deep Greek descriptors, but they were around. Those concepts were around for thousands of years, um, and they were being studied at sites like this where the stones interacted and interfaced with the earth and the earth's energy and the sky and the heaven. And remember, we think of the sky, where's the sky? We look up, there's the sky. But no, the sky starts right off the ground, right at our feet. That's the sky. The
So true.
atmosphere goes all the way down through our body to the floor of the earth. So
Great
that's where
observation. That's a great simple observation right there.
that's
Yeah.
that's where a lot is happening, and there's tribes in Africa that says a human soul doesn't enter the body until the baby's feet touch the ground. And until then they're not a sentient, I mean, of course that might make a lot of people upset, but anyhow, but we got to think of that perspective. That's an important and a valid perspective, and there actually may be science to that. A transference of energy directly into a human body through contact. But anyhow, we're digressing here and approaching the hour mark.
Well, is there anything else you'd like to share?
Sure, I have a couple of sites here. Let
Yeah,
me bring them up.
put your some of your slides up so we can get through
Yep.
some of them.
Give me a second here. I'll run through the end of my presentation.
Yeah.
Uh,
We got sidetracked, but you know what? It was worth it. I think we went over some really cool stuff. We can always have you back on in the future.
yeah, we're just scratching the surface as
Yeah.
usual. But we'll look at this site here over in not too far from your area. This is on the west side of the Hudson River at Marlboro Mountain. Are you seeing this, Turtle Rock?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a big effigy site, astronomy site on a ridge above the Hudson, a few miles north of Newburgh, and really right across the river from the mouth of the Wappingers Creek. Trying to get my slide to advance here. Come on, there we go. And this is it from the backside. This is a big stone, probably 50 tons, and the head and the mouth you
Wow.
can see. So, people debate whether this was uh, manipulated or whether it's natural. Either way, it's a fantastic site. There's a shelter inside it, and there are petroglyphs. And again, this is just mentioning how turtles are such a prominent part of Native American creation myths and spirituality. So Turtle Rock um, has some light phenomena associated with it. As the sun sets in the west on the equinox, you get a projection into this little grotto right behind the head of the serpent,
Wow.
or head of the turtle, uh, captures the sun's rays. And then you have another, this is also right behind the head in that same grotto, on the solstice. You get this, you see the orthogonal or 90-degree shadow.
Yeah.
That's natural, and that moves up, um, right, pointing to the spot where the sun will be at sunset. So what are the chances of that? And
Wow.
orthogonal creations, Native Americans have built orthogonal constructions. Um, that's, a lot of people dismiss it. 90 degrees, oh, it must be European, but no, there's a lot of walls in the Southwest, in the Hopi and the Navajo, that are 90-degree walls. Um, so yeah, really interesting light and cast shadow phenomenon there. And then right behind that, there's these, and these are inscribed. I'm going to highlight them here, but there's two circular balls with tails behind them that people interpret as a cometary event, like seeing two large comets falling in the sky, meteorites.
I see it. Yeah.
So here they are up here, right? One and two, they're pecked. And down here, what do you have? You have plant pigment that looks like it's a human with their arms raised, and then an animal off to the right here.
Oh my
I
God.
don't know if
That
you
looks like the plasma symbol. There's a Southwest petroglyph that looks just like that in Chaco Canyon and area.
this may be a very early recording of a commentary event, maybe related to the Younger Dryas, because that is, some scientists say that that was what caused the Younger Dryas.
Oh, Glenn, I
Um,
gotta when we finish, I gotta send you a message with other countries that have those similar symbols.
Here's a cross grid, that's also right near the turtle head.
Man, what is that? The
There's
I
this sun
Ching?
glyph, and we're going to be doing a field trip here in May. I can plug you in through
Please
Overlook
do.
Mountain Center. We're going to be going up here. There are portals like this. This one is
Whoa.
where the winter solstice sun comes up, and you can see Hudson River and Newburgh Bay through that portal. You
Oh
can
my
see off to the
God.
southeast. There's another portal here. So this is an amazing site. That's Michelina Picaro. She's of the Ramapo Lenape Munsee tribe, Turtle Clan. She was there with her husband, Vinny, Chief Vincent Man. Um, these are some of the alignments associated with Native American sites, not just solstice sunrises and lunar and equinox alignments, but if you look closely, you'll see exits and entrances to the sky world and entrances and exits to the underworld, and they're reciprocal. An exit is not an entrance, and an entrance is not an exit. Um, so many of the alignments uh, and constructions of stone in the Northeast match up with these types of angles. Another turtle rock. So it's a big turtle thing going on there. And I'll just wrap up with this site on the Hudson. So that's where Turtle Rock is. Here's the mouth of the Wappingers Creek. And this little point to land here is called Dance Camera Point, the Devil's Dance Chamber. And it was named that by Hudson. This is just the layout. When Hudson sailed up the river in 1609, on September 30th, the half moon sailed right past this point, and they saw a ceremony taking place on that point of land by the Lenape, the local Algonquin tribes were probably, or it was September 9th, probably the early corn festival, if you think about it. So they sailed up, they saw this big ceremony taking place, Native Americans dancing around fires and their bodies painted, and they logged it as the
They
Devil's Dance
probably were
Chamber.
shitting bricks.
Because yeah, it's the devil's work. They the Dutch the Dutch were Calvinists, so they believed in the devil, and this was devil, devil worship. And it's still called Dance Camera Point, and now a new kind of devil. It's the power company. uh, but
Yeah.
when I looked at this closely in the relationship, what I found was that point of land and its relationship to the mouth of the Wappingers Creek right across the river was a perfect summer solstice sunrise, winter solstice sunset alignment. And with Google Earth, you can map that right out. There's the sun rising. If you can see the, let me just, I'll go full screen here for the just through the end of these slides. But you can see it's 6:21, so it's the summer solstice. It's early in the morning, 5:23, and as the sun comes up, it aligns with the point of land and the mouth of the creek right there.
Incredible.
And then in the evening of the same day, the summer solstice sunrise, in the evening at sunset, you have Pleiades rises in the same exact spot as viewed from that point of
Whoa.
land. So this is why the Dan's camera was a sacred spot and the center, almost like an Axis Monday, the center of their spiritual world. And this is from the mouth of the creek over the point of land because a researcher named Gary Urton, anthropologist from MIT and Harvard, he said when he saw this research, well, you got to see the opposite because it's going to be a winter solstice sunset, and you see the date up here is 12:20, 5:30 in the evening as the sun is going down. It aligns, and he said he gave me a nod. He said also look for a galactic alignment that same night, and when I ran it, there's the Milky Way coming down, perfect alignment.
Oh my
So
God.
it's really confirming to see this kind of you know validity and validation of the research using tools like Google Earth. So it's very self-evident. This is why this was an important point.
Yeah. The
Uh,
balance rock on winter solstice has a alignment too.
yep, yep.
It's
So
right there.
so this is a quote from an endorsement of my book that it's clear that the Northeast has been totally and inappropriately marginalized by mainstream, and that the Northeast is right up there with the Southwest and Midwest, effigy mounds, lower Mississippi Valley, and other traditions in terms of archo-astronomical alignments, sensitivity to landscape features, cosmological understanding. Dr. William Romaine, and he's done a lot of good research. Um, so I'm gonna stop it there. A couple of Overlook Mountain Center people should check out. NERA has a conference coming up, coincides with the eclipse that's coming up, and it's taking place up in Burke, um, Vermont. So it'll be in the path of totalitarian for the eclipse. Um, and you had mentioned my book. Thank you. I have a few other ones my publisher would like me to mention. And with that, thank you. Thanks for having me, Ron.
No problem, Glenn. It's been a pleasure. I can't wait to have you on once again in the future. We will have you on maybe in a couple of months from now, or a couple of maybe at the end of the summer we can have you on.
Sounds good. Just hit me up. You know where I am on Facebook, and you can send people if they're interested to the Archaeoastronomy and Landscape Archaeology group and the Archaeoacoustic group on Facebook, where we post stuff related to those subjects.
Well, I would love to have more people be influenced by your work. It's really remarkable, some of the connections that you made. I hope we gave each other definitely a couple of gems today for sure. I
All
really
right,
appreciate it.
and I will pass along the information about the hike to Turtle Rock coming up in May.
For sure. Thank you so much. Everybody, Glenn Kreisberg, Spirits in Stone. Check it out. Once again, thank you, everybody. If you're looking for the copper tensor tools, you can find me at the mysticalspiralstore.com, and you can find Spirits in Stone wherever you buy books. Have a great weekend, everybody, and spiral out.